Rain hits the tin roof like a drum, hard and sudden. Musa stands on the edge of the roof of Block 9, bare feet on hot metal, one hand tight on a small brass key. The key is black at the teeth and smooth on the bow, a house key that fits nothing now but memory. Below, a paper rent notice flutters down a stairwell and slaps a woman's sandals like a small bird. The air smells of wet dust and frying onions from the tea shop 2 doors down. Wind tugs at his thin jacket and at the note in his pocket. The landlord's last demand. A shout from the street slices through the rain. "Move! The inspector is coming!" Musa looks at the brass key, then at the concrete below where a rusted gate waits. For one sharp moment he thinks of stepping off the roof into the dark alley and letting the key fall. He chooses to climb down instead, palms scraping, rain in his eyes, the key still warm in his fist. 3 weeks earlier, the flat is small and full of sounds. Amina packs a single plastic bag with clothes and a box of orange beads she keeps for luck. The kettle sings on the stove and a mosquito coil curls at the window. The smell of burnt cassava hangs in the room. Rent is due, and the landlord, Mr. Otieno, has left another thick envelope on the table with a penciled scrawl. Pay by Monday. Amina looks at Musa while she folds a shirt. She says nothing about the money she does not have. Her voice is low, like a drum under a lid. "Maybe I can go to Mombasa," she says, and the words fall like stones. Musa watches the small box of beads, imagines the key in his palm. Her eyes stay on his, steady. She does not say she loves him. She does not need to. The flat has the light of a late sun and the shadows are long. She lifts the bag, slams the door, and the sound stays in his chest like a struck bell. That first night after Amina leaves, the light keeps blinking on the mosquito coil. Musa sits on a plastic chair with a newspaper rigid under his knees. The room smells of salt and sadness. He goes to the landlord's narrow office the next morning, the brass key heavy in his pocket like a heartbeat. Mr. Otieno sits behind a wooden desk, fat with a ledger, his fingers stained with ink. He opens a drawer and drops a photograph of the flat into Musa's hands, a picture of a small woman with a plastic bag, gone. "You are late," the landlord says, voice like gravel. He points at the ledger as if it is a verdict. Musa offers an excuse, a small joke about work. The landlord throws the key back at him like a coin. "We want the rent," he says. "Pay or leave." The hallway smells of wet paint and soap. Musa walks home with the key burning in his pocket. The next days are a drum of small cruelties. The water is cut off without warning, the taps scratch like a dry throat. A neighbor's baby cries through the thin walls, and a smell of burnt maize comes from the downstairs room where a man presses paper into a small fire to keep warm. Musa looks for work and meets 3 doors slammed in his face. He sweeps at a market stall until the owner decides he is not worth the wage. A bus driver refuses him, and the conductor calls him a thief for being late. Night brings sleep that tumbles and wakes like the tide. He eats fried dough and half a mango and thinks of the key. He tries to call Amina, but the number is dead or changed to a voice that says, "Not in service." A pigeon drops a white feather on his window. It looks like a small flag of surrender. When money runs out, people change. The landlord's enforcer, a man with a flat cap and thick hands, knocks at the door. He comes at dusk with a lantern and a list. "You have 3 days," he says, voice clipped, not cruel but practiced. He drums his fingers on the rim of a tin. Musa tries to find a different flat, but the market eats his coins and leaves him nothing. He sits on the stairs and unrolls a map of the city in his head, places he could go, cities where work waits like light. He thinks of Accra, Lagos, Cape Town, names he learned from someone at the bus station. One night, a young boy from 2 doors down offers him a place on a mat in a room of 6 men who snore and speak of fish and freight. Musa takes the mat and the offer, The brass key lies on the table like a small question. On the third morning after the enforcer's visit, Musa puts the brass key and a small bundle into a cloth bag and walks out before dawn while the street cooks gossip, and the sun is a thin coin at the horizon. He leaves the flat with its chipped paint and the mosquito coil still smoldering. Down the alley a woman draws water and stares after him with eyes that are open and raw. He carries no suitcase, only the key and a few clothes and a handful of stubbornness. His feet ache on the long walk to the bus station. A vendor sells bread with hot tea, and a man in a blue cap tells him of a job in Dar es Salaam that pays with room and food. Musa sells his last slice of mango for bus fare and writes Amina's name in the dust on the window. He folds the paper away and boards the bus with the key under his shirt, heart loud as thunder. The road is a film of dust and water. He learns to sleep on buses and in small, cheap guest houses where a towel is a luxury. He meets a woman from Accra named Zanele in a cafe who laughs with her hands and teaches him how to trade small things. Buy low, sell high, she says. And she places a mango on the table like a lesson. Musa learns fast. He washes cars at a station and counts coins into a small tin. He rolls up his sleeves and works until his hands crack and the skin goes hard. A man named Thabo introduces him to a man who knows people in tech and says, "You like numbers?" Musa does. He learns to type on a computer in a room where the air smells of cables and coffee. At night he sits with code like a book of spells, and the brass key sits beside the keyboard, a relic that grounds him. He starts a small service, tracking land papers and helping people get proofs of ownership. It is honest work and small at first, with a printer that coughs and papers that smell of toner. Obstacles stack like wet plates. A man from a bigger firm steals one of Musa's simple ideas and turns it into a pitch for a bright office in Accra, leaving Musa with a note that reads, "Good luck." Laptop is stolen from the cafe one rainy night while Musa sleeps with his head on his arms. He loses a small client when the road collapses and the ferry does not run. Each loss is a stone in his chest. But each time he counts the stones and thinks of the brass key and of Amina's face when she left. He keeps working. He patches his system with cheap parts and helps people sign papers that matter. Mothers who want proof to keep the market stall, a widow who wants a small plot, a teacher who wants to keep a corner shop. Slowly, people begin to call him Musa the Fixer. He wires money home when he can, and one phrase begins to appear in texts from the neighborhood. He is trying. At the city office of land records, he sits on a hard bench with a folder of photocopies like a small, tattered promise. The clerk, a woman named Esther, has a ring of ink on her finger and laughs with a mouth full of good lines. She teaches him the dance of stamps and apartments and the way a signature carries weight like a tide. "Watch for the false ink," she says, her fingers pointing at a stack of deeds like blades. Some men pay and buy papers that do not belong to them. Musa watches the paper, its grain like riverbed lines. He begins to put together a service that offers legal checks for small tenants. He teaches a group of market women to bring their small deeds and receipts, and he stands in the sun with them and reads the forms like a book. Word moves fast in the market. A man with a key can help. Midway through his grinding climb, the house of his memory opens in a way he did not expect. One afternoon, a courier brings him a thin envelope from Nairobi. Inside, an old neighbor named Wanjiru has sent him a shaky video and a note. The video is a phone clip filmed from a balcony, shaky and bright. Amina is there, handing a small bundle to a nurse in a hospital corridor, her hair tied back, beads on her wrist, the plastic bag at her feet. The note says, "Amina paid a bill. She left to save her brother. She is not gone for good." Musa watches the video in a cafe where rain draws lines on the window and his coffee goes cold. The image blows open like a door. Amina did not leave to punish him. She left to save a life. The brass key suddenly feels like a promise he has a duty to keep rather than a wound he must hide. The twist turns his anger into something else, into a fuel for action. He feels for the first time a clean anger, to come back and to make the place where they lived right again. That clean anger points him toward a new idea and new work. Musa builds a small company that connects mobile payments to legal land checks, helping neighbors prove ownership and stop corrupt landlords from forging papers. He hires Esther and a woman from the market who knows how to make calm when people are loud. They print 1,000 flyers. They teach at church halls and under mango trees. They work nights to check signatures by lantern light. Small donations become seed money. A small fund becomes a grant. When a journalist hears their story and writes about the man with a brass key who fixes papers. The company grows in a way Musa did not expect. Investors come from Accra and Lagos and Dar es Salaam, men and women with clean suits and loud shoes and belts that shine. They want to buy a piece of the work for a price that tastes like salt. Musa takes some offers and keeps some. Money comes, and with it a slow, bright change. They buy a proper office with a photocopier that coughs less and a wall painted green, and the brass key gets polished and hangs on a nail behind the desk. Just as things look up, the first big storm hits. Musa's company becomes important and visible. A television crew comes to film a success story about people who beat back corrupt deeds. They ask to film the moment he returns the key to his old flat building in Nairobi. Musa flies back with Esther and a small team. The city is heavy with heat and the smell of diesel. He arrives at Block 9 with a stack of papers and a leather folder that contains a deed. One copy, stamped by the city that names him as the new owner, but built into it is a clause for tenants' rights and a trust to keep rents low. He believes this deed will right the wrongs. But the moment to unlock the gate is a storm front. Across from the flat, Mr. Otieno comes with a crowd, his face pale but hard. He holds a different paper and a loud voice. "You cannot own what you did not pay for," he says. And his men laugh and jostle. The TV camera rolls. The street crowd swells like water in a gutter. The first climax is spectacle. A press van with a satellite dish opens, a reporter in a sharp dress points a microphone, and helicopters hum above like giant insects. Musa sets the brass key to the lock that has been welded closed for months, and the metal clicks. The camera captures the sound like a drum. He lifts his folder, and a clerk from the land office steps forward. An old woman, thin with ink-stained nails, a woman who used to bring her tea to the same kettle. She holds up a battered file and says into the microphone, "This is the original record." The crowd presses closer, and a child records with a phone. An unexpected witness steps forward. A young man from the market who used to work for Mr. Otieno hands a small envelope to the TV reporter. Inside are photos of the landlord taking payment and the corners of receipts with a white powder of dust. The city official on whose desk forged papers once rested looks pale and small. The landlord's men sputter. The camera zooms on Mr. Otieno's face as he goes red, the kind of red that means a person is losing more than money. He is losing his story. But victory does not come easily. Mr. Otieno strikes back with lawyers and threats, and a tricky twist appears. The developer who wants Block 9 for a new tower shows up with a signed bill of sale that seems, on first look, legal. A fire breaks out in a neighboring room the night before the court date, and one elderly tenant loses her small shop and a box of beads that were her son's. The city court delays the case and the press loses interest. Musa sits in a cheap hotel room with the brass key under his pillow, and the weight of a difficult choice pressing on him. Pay the developer a quiet sum to keep the building safe, but give up control, or fight in court, and risk losing the building and the trust of the people who now depend on him. The loss of the old woman's shop cuts him like a blade. He hears her cough in his head, and the beads scattered like small, dull moons. The crisis is a hard one. Money would fix it quickly. Bribe the developer, sign a small paper, keep the news from the woman, and put the tenants in a different building. But Musa sees the burned box of beads and Amina's face in the phone video and knows his fight is bigger than any single check. He chooses to fight. He hires a lawyer who drinks tea and shakes his head, but the lawyer finds a path. A clerk from an old land office remembers a ledger and agrees to testify if the court will protect her. This is the part of the story where hope looks like a small match in a dark hut. Musa signs papers, gives up a large part of his cash to pay legal fees, and sleeps on a cot in a hospital when exhaustion takes him. For days his hands shake from too much work and not enough food. He rereads the video of Amina helping a patient in a corridor and thinks of how she risked everything for someone else. That memory pulls him through. The multi-climax comes like a river breaking a dam. The day of the public hearing is too hot, the sky a thin blanket, and tourists pass with cameras and cheap maps. The TV crew arrives early and a crowd gathers that looks like a market stall, loud, hopeful, curious. Musa stands in the middle with the brass key on a chain at his neck. The judge's bench is high and serious. The clerk brings the original stamp and hands it to the court. Then an unexpected witness steps up, the young worker who used to deliver Mr. Otieno's receipts, a man named Juma with a dirt-streaked face and a voice that is steady. He shows a video of Mr. Otieno exchanging money with a developer and of a contract with forged signatures. The footage is shaky, but the camera angle is enough. His testimony cracks the facade. The developer's lawyers sputter. The judge asks Mr. Otieno to explain his papers, and he cannot. He stumbles, and the flat voice of the judge cuts him off. Outside, the crowd cheers, a sound from deep inside the chest, sharp as horn. The landlord's shoulders slump like a man folding an old shirt. Men with plain shirts and badges take him away. They remove his keys, his ledger, and the small framed photograph of his office like stage props. Television captures his face as he is led away, stripped of the power he had used like a blunt tool. Musa watches the men carry Mr. Otieno toward a small van, and the crowd parts like a wave. He feels a tide of relief and a heavy current of grief for the people who suffered. The court rules that the deed in Musa's folder is genuine, and that a trust must be established to hold Block 9 for tenants. The city signs a promise to help rebuild the burned stalls and to protect small owners. A developer is ordered to refund a part of the money he took and to invest instead in homes rather than towers. The press covers the moment like a holiday. Cameras fall. Musa, as he walks back into Block 9, where a child runs up and hands him a stick like a scepter, then a woman ties a rag to his wrist like a blessing. He goes to the old flat and fits the brass key into the lock. The door opens with a soft, honest sound, like a page turning. The work after the court is a slow building of something better. Musa uses the deed not as a ticket to the top, but as a tool to create a tenant cooperative. He sets up a board with Esther and the elderly woman whose shop burned, and a young man who can fix the taps. They paint the stairwell sunny yellow and fix the taps so that water runs day and night. They make a rule that rent will be low and fair, and that the building will be safe. They plant a small garden on the roof with cassava and herbs and a mango that he and Amina used to watch when they first dated. Musa opens a small desk at the front door for people to check papers and to get help with forms. Children play on the stairs and do not fear a ring of men at the gate. The brass key hangs behind the desk, not as a sign of power, but as a reminder of how small things can become big. Amina returns one evening like a simple miracle. She walks into Block 9 as the sky turns orange and the smell of evening stew curls out from the windows. She is thinner and carries a satchel of medicine. She looks at the roof garden and then at the brass key on its nail, and she laughs like someone who has survived a storm. Musa meets her outside the flat where they used to live, and they stand with the sun on their faces. They do not speak for a long time because words would be clumsy and loud. He hands her the orange beads that the old woman saved from the fire. She takes them with shaking hands. They talk about small things first. The mango tree on the roof, the neighbor's child learning to fix a radio, the smell of cassava in the morning. They speak of the hard days without sharpening their voices into blame. He tells her about the clinic she worked in and the sickness she saved. She tells him how she thought leaving would protect him because their name was on no papers, and the landlord could take the whole world. They sit on the stair, and an old radio plays low music, and the world outside is heavy with a new, softer light. 6 months later, the building looks different from the picture on the first rent notice. The paint is fresh, the stair railings are smooth, and there is a sign on the front gate that says Block 9 Tenants Cooperative in bold letters. The mango tree on the roof has small green fruit, and a bird has built a nest in its branches. Musa walks the stairs in a shirt that fits now because he has learned how to stand without crouching in fear. A child runs up and hands him a drawing of a key with a heart in the head, and he pins it to the wall with a nail. The market woman who runs the small stall at the bottom of the stairs now earns enough to buy a brighter lamp, and the old woman who lost her beads sells small pots of stew for visitors. Amina opens a small clinic in a room at the front where she stitches small cuts and gives medicine that she buys with the cooperative's small fund. They both work to keep rents low and to teach the neighbors how to read papers and how to say no to scary men who bring forged papers. Musa keeps the brass key on the wall behind the front desk, shiny and calm. He sometimes takes it down at night and holds it to his chest, feeling its cold and smooth curve. He sees its scratches and remembers the roof and the rain and the moment he could have let it fall. The trust they build becomes a model, and officials from other neighborhoods come to learn. They speak in halls about the Block 9 method. Keep deeds safe, teach the people, make the law work for the small, and not just the loud. A lawyer visits with a slow smile and thanks him for the court documents that helped change a policy. News travels by word of mouth, and then by papers, and then by a television that shows faces and small, honest tears. The noise of the old landlord is quieter now. He sits in a small office where he cannot call a meeting, where he cannot raise his voice and make things disappear. He is forced to return the money he gathered or to pay for the rebuilding. The man who once had keys now serves time learning the law in a way that is meant to teach him the cost of lies. Musa does not feel glee at his shame. He feels only a calm kind of rightness, like the cooling of a fever. The community holds a small ceremony when the last pile of bricks is set. They plant the mango sapling deeper, they nail a new sign, and they cook a pot of rice big enough to feed a street. Esther dances with a mop and the children clap. Amina places a small card under the key that reads, "For those who return." Musa walks the market that afternoon and stops at a stall to buy a slice of cake. He sees a group of young men leaning near a wall, wearing the same flat caps as the old enforcers used to wear, and he sees that their faces are softer. A training group from the cooperative teaches them how to read and how to fix small things. He passes a wall with a mural painted of a key turning into a tree and keeps walking. The brass key behind the desk glints in the sun when the window opens. He knows the law is fragile and the world can still throw storms. He keeps teaching, keeps pouring his time into the work. Amina opens the clinic every morning at 9, and people come in with scraped knees and small illnesses and leave better. The city council calls to ask how they did it, and he tells them the truth. Check papers, teach people, use your money for houses, not towers. He remembers nights when he thought he would lose everything and now stands at a window of the same flat, looking down at a street that is softer. Children play in a doorway that once smelled of worry. A woman hangs bright clothes on a line and they flap like flags in slow wind. The brass key is not the end, but a knot tying what was broken back together. He thinks of Amina and of the video that flipped his anger into purpose. He thinks of the clerk Esther and the young man Juma who risked themselves to speak the truth. The city changes in small ways, like water finding a new path. Musa does not become a man who forgets the past. He becomes one who remembers so he can fix the next hurt. The sun rests on the roof garden, and the mango leaves whisper. Musa walks up the stairs and places his hand on the brass key, not to hold it, but to feel a small pulse beneath his palm, the pulse of a building that now belongs to many hands. He looks at Amina in the doorway of the clinic, her smile soft and fierce, and he thinks of all the nights he could have thrown the key away. He does not pity the man who once held too much power. He feels a strange hope that people can change when they must and when they are shown a way. Blocks and laws and papers are fragile. The heart inside them must be stronger. In the small yard behind the gate, a young girl pulls a toy cart, and the sound is bright and steady. Kindness and courage are richer than the strongest bank balance. Do you believe in second chances? If this story warmed your heart, please share it with a friend who needs hope today, and follow for more true field tales. The stairway of Block 9 sighs beneath a softer rain, and the radio hums a lullaby of streets and diesel, and in the glow of the corridor, Amina sits beside Musa, their hands resting near the brass key as if it might speak, when outside there is the crack of a car horn and the shimmer of a mirror in the lobby where a woman steps into the light. Not young exactly, but youngish, in a way that makes you think years have taught her more than age could. She wears a scarf of bright colors that lifts the air around her like a banner, and her eyes are kind but alert, and she says without preamble that she is Mara Ndegwa, CEO of a philanthropic investment group that has watched Block 9 unfold from the shadows and learned how a community can teach a city what justice looks like when people refuse to give up, and she speaks with the quiet certainty of someone who has walked every hallway of power and found a door left ajar for mercy, and she asks if Musa can spare a moment to walk with her into the sun-drenched yard where the mango tree guards the roof, and she tells him that the wind has carried stories of their work to people who buy weight with their words, people who want to be part of a long, low roar of change, and she does not pretend the road was easy or that fear never came. She simply says she wants to help him keep the promise of Block 9 alive and growing, and the air tightens with the gravity of a moment that changes the weather around them. And Musa, who has learned to listen twice before he speaks, asks where this help will land and what price will tag along with it. And Mara answers with the soft smile of a mentor who knows the cost of every gift. This is not a handout, but a partnership, not a single victory, but a plan to protect tenants across neighborhoods, not a gleaming tower, but a blueprint for hundreds of homes rooted in communities. And she lays out a proposition that sounds almost impossible to a man who has learned to count every coin, a proposal that would fund the cooperative's first expansion, stabilize rents for the next decade, and place Block 9 on a map not as a rumor, but as a model. She then adds, almost as an afterthought when the eyes of the crowd gather, that she has a personal reason for backing this cause, something she will tell him only after he agrees to listen. And Musa feels the old pull of risk tug at his sleeve. But the thought behind those eyes, the hidden wealth behind private mercy, shifts his breath from fear to resolve. And he nods, because a decision made in the presence of a wind that could blow a man either toward despair or toward the courage of a village feels like the first honest step away from the old life. And the interval marker arrives not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper that changes what every footstep has meant before. Mara's people arrange a meeting with the city's land board, and when Musa and Esther and the others slip into a glass-weird boardroom below the city's smoky bustle, the air tastes faintly of coffee and new paint and the hum of air conditioners that refuse to sleep. And the board's faces are careful. their questions precise, as if they have watched this staircase of a struggle from every possible vantage and expect every possible trick to be played again. Then Mara slides a tablet across the table and shows them a deed that has never sat on anyone's desk before. A deed that names Block 9 as a tenants' cooperative and sets up a foundation that will hold the property in trust and guarantee rents that will not rise beyond a fixed cap. And she explains that the cooperative will be run by a rotating board of residents and beneficiaries of the fund, with Musa as a chief steward who can speak for the people in rooms where money talks and the poor are rarely heard. And when she says that the fund will also seed small enterprises around the market to diversify the neighborhood's income without displacing families, a hush falls. The kind of hush that follows a winter storm where everyone learns to listen for the next wind, and the room suddenly feels smaller and then bigger at the same time, as if power itself had learned to bend to mercy. And in that hush, a young man from the market, Juma, who once handed Otieno a bribe and now carries a camera for the cooperative, speaks for the first time in public, saying he has lived in fear of a landlord who could erase him with a signature, but he has seen now that signatures can carry a different weight, and that weight is not metal or ink, but the trust of people who have learned to read the truth in a deed written faiti, or them, not against them. And when Mara nods to him with a quiet thanks that could be heard across 100 streets, Musa feels a cautious hope rise that this might not be a victory bought with the sacrifice of others' dignity, but a victory shared by the people who kept faith with each other when the city forgot they existed. And Amina, who has come to the meeting with a calm that seems to say she has learned to guard her own fire, speaks softly about the clinic and how every patient who leaves carries a form that proves their right to care. And she adds that the Foundation's funds will also allow free clinics in a few more blocks, so that healing and shelter become a shared obligation rather than a charity extended to the few who can afford it. But the wealth gap, stubborn as a stubborn drumbeat, does not yield by politeness alone, and a second, sharper turning point arrives in the form of a brief message that flashes on the projector like a blade catching the room's light. A name, a familiar one, a very loud name, a billionaire who has made his fortune shaping cities and selling dreams of progress to people who cannot keep up with the price tag of development, and who now wants a piece of Block 9 because stories like this are good press, and because a city can always be seen as better when the camera loves a hopeful, uplift story. For a heartbeat, the room holds its breath, because even those with faith in Mara's plan know the risk of inviting a new power into a place where power used to speak from a gate and a ledger, and Musa feels the old pulse of fear in his chest, the memory of Mr. Otieno's sharp grin, and the weight of the key in his pocket. Yet Mara's eyes, when they meet his, have that same calm certainty, and she says plainly that this billionaire, who prefers to remain anonymous in public, has built a quiet fortune on housing for the poor and is ready to turn his influence into a permanent shield for Block 9's residents, not a weapon to pry open doors. And she explains that the billionaire's model is to lend at terms that keep rents affordable, to fund legal clinics that can thwart forged documents before they can ever be used, and to test new landlord-tenant rules across several neighborhoods until the city learns to see tenants as part of the city's own heartbeat, not as a problem to be managed or a risk to be controlled. And she adds that the billionaire has requested a ceremony where Musa and Amina will be publicly acknowledged, not for a singular triumph, but for a sustained, ongoing act of care for their community. A ceremony that will be less about spectacle and more about the long rhythm of responsibility. Musa watches the room's faces tilt toward one another as if a new map has begun to draw itself, and he feels a strange mix of relief and doubt, because power in this city has always lived outside the door of Block 9, and now it stands just beyond the gate waiting to be invited in. But he also senses a real possibility that the billionaire's discreet generosity could become a longer, steadier shield for the cooperative, and that Mara's trust in him is not a trap, but a bridge built with the same care that built their stairwell garden, the same care that turned a brass key into a symbol of something shared. The mid-paragraph turning point arrives when a late afternoon swell of voices erupts outside Block 9. The enforcers who once pressed a thin man into a corner now stand aside, and the crowd pushes closer, drawn by a rumor that the hearing has produced a new kind of proof. Not only a deed, but a public pledge from Mara's foundation to finance the first phase of the cooperative's expansion, including a small clinic annex and a housing wing for young families who once slept on mats in crowded rooms. And as the crowd cheers and the new sign goes up on the gate, the Block 9 Tenants Cooperative, the old fear tied to the landlord's fearsome eyes begins to loosen, and Esther, who once taped receipts to a wall and counted stamps for hours, claps her hands with everyone else and laughs with a happiness that sounds almost like rain on tin. And in the middle of the street where neighbors gather like a chorus, Musa takes the brass key from the nail behind the desk and slides it into the palm of his hand as if it is a reminder not of power won but of responsibility earned. And he tells the crowd that the deal is not about him or Mara or a mysterious donor, but about the people who refused to move when their walls trembled, about the mothers who kept feeding their stalls when the taps ran dry, about the children who learned to dream of a future where roofs do not leak and deeds are safe. And he swears aloud that no one will ever again be allowed to leverage fear to rewrite someone's name on a paper. And Amina looks at him with that same quiet strength she showed when she whispered to him at the stair, and she nods, knowing that the real victory is not the moment in court or the camera's flash, but the morning after, when a clinic opens its doors and a lines of people come in with small wounds and bigger hopes. The Billionaire's spokesperson steps forward to unveil the first grant disbursed to the cooperative, and the air carries a new kind of light, the light of a city that realizes it can afford to be generous without surrendering its edge. The ending of this interval is a promise wrapped in a proverb turned policy. Kindness and courage, when joined with structure and accountability, are richer than the strongest bank balance, and the city's economy shifts a little toward justice because a community learned to read a deed and hold a room together when fear came calling. The old man with the key who once filled the night with shouts and threats is now a quiet figure in a courtroom chair, watching as his own misdeeds are weighed not by vengeance, but by a ledger whose digits are not only numbers, but names and stories of people who refuse to be erased. Musa stands at the door of the new clinic, the brass key resting on a small velvet pad behind the glass, and he turns to Amina with the familiar tremor of a man who has learned to measure his life in acts of care rather than breaths of fear. She answers with a smile that holds 1,000 patient mornings and 1,000 small messages of healing, and together they walk into the warm glow of Block 9's future, where the garden on the roof hums with bees and rainwater catches on leaves like little mirrors, where the market women lay down receipts that prove ownership to a corner stall that is now theirs forever, where the mutual aid fund pays for a child's birth and a grandmother's medicine, where a young trainee learns to read a contract and a child learns to dream of being a lawyer who fights for the next generation, and where the brass key, no longer a weapon but a reminder, hangs behind the desk not to command, but to remind every new resident that they hold a turn in the turning of this city toward mercy, a city that will never forget how one stubborn door was opened when a girl named Amina handed back the beads and a boy named Musa chose to stay and fix what fear tried to break. And as the last light slides along Block 9's new wall and the mango leaves rustle in a patient evening breeze, the story pauses for a breath that feels like the first relief after a harsh rain and promises that the next chapter will bring challenges again. Yet with a foundation this deep, the next storm may come only to test the new roots, not to drown them. And in that possibility lies the stubborn, bright heartbeat of a city learning to share its wealth, its power, and its future with everyone who belongs.